You are listening to part 2 of episode 37 of the Psychotherapist Podcast. In this part of the episode, Sir Bobbert and I discuss moon landing conspiracies, which is always a great time. I break down Herodotus, the grandfather of history, and why he's actually a right-wing conspiracy nutjob. And I have evidence. Sir Bobbert expounds upon Karl Jung's moving on Anima versus Animus concept, which ties to gender and masculine and feminine roles. And we also discuss a very moving documentary about a disease called vagina dentata. The documentary is called Teeth, and if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, you might want to make sure you stick around to the end for this one. All that and more on this episode of the Psychotherapist Podcast. Thank you for listening. Yeah, man, it's just wild stuff, but who knows? Man, do you think the moon landing was real?
The moon landing?
Yeah.
I did, and now I'm not so sure.
What cast doubt in your mind?
Just the fact that there was such a race, literally a race with the Russians at that point. And looking at the evolution of how us, China, and the Russians have competed in so many areas, artificial intelligence and things like that, computers, that I think that I wouldn't put it past us to do something like that as a CIA tactic.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I used to super believe it, and now, I mean, I'm not convinced that it was fake or faked or whatever. My guess, sort of gut reaction was that it was done, but I mean, just camera technology, like maybe the cameras got fucked up, so they recreated it basically, or refilmed it for propaganda value. But then you look into like these weird quotes of like NASA people saying we haven't gone to the moon since and we don't have that technology anymore,
right? Which
is really fucking weird. But I mean, there was this whole on Timcast, Alex Stein, Primetime 99, the guy who said AOC's a big booty Latina, he got so entrenched into this, it was actually kind of like ridiculous to watch because he was so certain that it was fake, and Tim was just kind of calling him out on some of the stuff. But like, it is kind of wild to me that there's actual NASA people who are like, yeah, we don't somehow we had this technology that was less than an iPhone where we managed to pull this off, but now we can't do it anymore. It's like, what the fuck?
Pretty bizarre.
It's very bizarre, but yeah.
That's why people like Elon Musk and others came on the scene. They were skeptics. The people like him had a lot of doubts about what the hell we were doing, what we said we were doing, or they wouldn't have invested all of their money and resources in things like space.
Yeah, man, it is a weird thing, but honestly, I think just space is so fucking useless. I'm just one of those people, who's like, there's no air on Mars. Let's fix this planet first. Let's terraform this planet that's already kind of got the conditions right before trying to you might as well try to engineer a new planet.
Exactly.
So it's kind of just, I don't know, it's a little ridiculous, and I think it's all just a fucking distraction anyway.
It's like the Russians taking over, going in and reestablishing Ukraine as one of their properties. It's like, who's going to claim parts of the moon, as their own? The Chinese are screwed up so bad. They got stuff floating around out there.
Oh, yeah.
Bumping into meteors and things. That's because they're in such a rush to beat the Americans.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess who was going to own the moon, I would say probably like BlackRock or like Coca-Cola or like some mega corporation, you know what I mean? I feel like they would just have the fucking, it'll be like, that's why I think so many space shows are like space westerns, because that'll be like the new frontier where like, who knows what the next like space gold fucking rush will be or whatever.
Cowboys and aliens.
Oh yeah man, so it'll be interesting.
It's a fascinating concept. When they came out with those first movies, they were sort of just a real big joke, and then they came out with more of them. They got a little more sophisticated.
Yeah, man. I'm thinking about having aliens in my book, possibly. They'll just, like, basically arrive from meteors that crash on the, like, Earth, but I have no idea how I'm going to integrate that. And there's a lot of workshopping I need to do with my book, but it's such a big project, but I love it all, you know, and I have kind of like a structure. I wrote I don't think I sent it to you, but I wrote an outline for the first book. Kind of just a basic thing of what each chapter would be. Did I ever send that to you?
Yeah, you did send.
I remember sending you something I wrote, like a 3-page, like, mini chapter or whatever.
Right. You said this is just a beginning. You know.
Yeah, this is like literally just an outline. So I'm working on that and been listening to a lot of the Mike Duncan, like, History of Rome podcast to get a lot of inspiration. Reading Herodotus has some great stuff, and I might as well throw this as a quick agenda item. So, you know how like conservatives or libertarians or people like me, you know, will say that they're trying to feminize society to create a more compliant, weak, pliable, easily controlled, obedient, whatever society. So in Herodotus, which is set like 2,500 years ago, roughly, you know.
You might want to, for the audience, say a word about Herodotus and what it is and who it is or whatever. So a lot of people, not including you, are not as informed as you are about history.
Right. So Herodotus wrote this really famous work called The Histories, and he talks about the sort of Persian Empire and all their interactions with the Greeks and kind of like where they came from. And, you know, he's toured different places and describes like the customs and like cultures of different places. So it's this very interesting mishmash of storytelling and like history and whatever. He's kind of he gets the sort of credit as being the sort of father or grandfather of history, also the father of lies. Lies, you know. I have no idea how accurate that is or not, but so he wrote.
This is a caricature of Herod. Herod. Wasn't he the blasphemous Herod? King Herod, yeah.
Like a biblical king?
Yeah.
What about him?
Is this Herodotus, Herod, is there Italian?
I don't think so. Herodotus was like a Greek guy. Yeah, so he wasn't
not mythical.
No, I mean, it's interesting because it's like not far from the biblical age, like sort of pre-Bronze Age, but it's also like closer to the stuff we know about, like the Thermopylae and the 300 movie, the sort of Greco-Persian Wars. We know all about that stuff, but
when you say we know all about that stuff, let me play devil's advocate and just say that we may not, all of us, we, being collective, we may not know all of that you know. So you may. I meant
we as in like historical canon, like unless you talk to a certain TikToker or two, you know, we have enough evidence, archaeological evidence, writings, accounts, whatever, to say, at the very least, Greece and Persia fought each other.
Okay.
You know what I mean? There are things from like before that era, like Assyria, for example. There's like a 50-year period. They were like on top of the world, and then they just kind of disappear from the histories, and we don't really know what and we being like just anyone who looks at records or archaeology or whatever, it's just like the sources didn't survive.
Okay.
Yeah. So the point I was kind of getting to with Herodotus is that there's just, and I freaking took a photo of this yesterday because I was like, you know, it just vindicated my tinfoil, I guess, where there was, I can't even remember the setup, but basically there was like some king who was like, I need to subjugate these people. What do I do with them? Do I kill them all? Do I enslave them all? Whatever. And one of his advisors says, veto their right to arms, take away all their guns, and like push the men to like learn the harp or whatever, and within a generation they'll be women and you'll fucking rule them with ease. And this is like the thinking of like so fucking far back. But you talk about how modern people, you know, when you say, well, they want to make dudes bitches,
right, exactly,
and take all the guns, well, it's like, this is nothing fucking new. They've been doing this shit for thousands of years. You know, they're like, during the, you know, 1718 Enlightenment era or whatever, like in Europe, there were no peasant armies. There were only professional armies. They did not want peasants knowing how to fucking use guns.
Right.
And when France kind of crossed that line and had regular peasants, it got fucking crazy. And you had Napoleon, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I just thought it was a fun little sort of tidbit. You know, I was like, did Alex Jones write this? Like,
I'm interested when I see. Actually, I have one more thing that I want to get in, and it's an excerpt from something I read this morning. I lost my train of thought here. Okay, you go on, it'll come back to me.
So, I'll just say that Herodotus was sort of like one of two kind of grandfathers of history. The other is a guy named Thucydides who wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War.
Okay.
Which I read like half of, and then it got away from me. But I'm just really enjoying Herodotus now, and they go through very... I can't really remember any great examples right now. Oh, I have one. All these cultural examples, like for example, the Persians, whenever they had to make an important decision, they would do it shit-faced. And then they would sober up the next day, and if they still liked their decision, they would stick with it. Likewise, if they made a decision sober, they would get shit-faced and then say, guys, are we still on board with this? You know, so there's just a lot of color and kind of like kooky, fun stuff, and stuff that I'm going to like copy and paste basically into my own book for different, you know, cultures or whatever.
You would make history interesting.
I'm trying to.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, you know, so that's why I see it as like, my thing is more Game of Thrones than Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones is mostly kind of just English, War of the Roses, medieval period, and nothing wrong with that, and it has other things going on. But mine's more like the ancient Mediterranean world, where you kind of just have this perfect, like with Italy, you have sort of your fucking Scandinavian-looking motherfuckers to the north, you've got Africans to the south, you've got, you know, Greece and Egypt and Persia to the east, and all these different, like, you know, civilizations and stuff. And it's not just, you know, with at least the way I'm working on mine, I want to make all the other civilizations awesome. I don't want them just to be, you know, Rome's bitch right off the bat, you know.
Speaking of leaders and interesting leaders of countries, did you see the hot leader of Finland, the 36-year-old woman?
She's single?
She's married, but she's like, she's going to take a drug test to prove to herself and to the world that she's not on drugs. So they have a picture of her at nightclubs and stuff, just, you know, really getting down, and, you know, seedy places, you know, showing up at seedy bars and stuff, and partying like a party animal of the century.
Little powder on the nose.
Yeah, and she's the whatever, the president or whatever of Finland.
Well, who gives a shit? Like, Obama inhaled once. Who gives a fuck?
Exactly.
You know, it's just...
Exactly.
I don't know, but I
know what it was I lost. When you're talking about wanting to, you know, sort of turn the men into women, you know, this is definitely... I keep thinking of why this is happening right now. And I it's been there all along in different aspects of history. Did you mention one? And I think like Karl Jung's theory of anima and animus, his belief, and Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this. He does a lot of stuff on Karl Jung, some of his lectures,
right,
where Karl Jung believed that we were really, you know, we have characteristics of each sex, that males have characteristics of females and vice versa. And he called one anima and one animus. And he truly believed that that's how we were, you know, we were meant to think and act and behave. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and those characteristics exist. Freud, his buddy, on the other hand, said, no, it's all about the penis, man, you know. That's the power play. You know, really.
So Freud he thought the world was basically swinging dick, dog eat dog, or he thought the world should be?
Oh, he thought the way it was.
Okay.
And that's why there was penis envy.
Interesting.
And that's why people had fantasies of castration. You know, and, you know, sex. There was that the construct of, it's not castration, another term used for it about, you know, men being fearful of, you know, losing their penis if they had inserted it into the woman's vagina, you know, for the longest time. And so he was definitely hypersexual.
Have you ever heard of the movie Teeth?
Teeth?
Yeah.
No.
This is a classic. So this came out in like 2009 or something. It's about this high school girl who's like super Christian and like part of like a fucking chastity group or whatever. She finds out she has teeth in her vagina.
Oh my god.
And,
all right.
And
yeah.
you can just imagine what goes awry from that. And honestly, hilarious movie. I loved it, but also just nightmarish stuff.
So what you can consider it sci-fi, horror?
I would say it's like
comedy.
I would say it's like a horror comedy.
Okay.
Yeah. There's like she goes for OBG whatever YN, you know, and the fingers get caught in there. And just, oh man, it gets nasty.
The doctor loses his fingers?
Doctor loses his fingers.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then apparently it's like this myth of like vagina dentata, I think is what they called it.
Yeah, vagina dentata.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know about the whole everyone. I mean, I know Liz Warren has it. Did you hear what she had to say?
Oh, I can only imagine.
People come up to me all the time and they say, I'd vote for you if you had a penis.
Oh, yeah. Right.
It's like, sure, Liz Warren, I'm sure people come up to you all the time and say, Lizzie, get a dick.
Right, right. I love that somebody, it might have been Tucker Carlson last night, who showed this party animal in Finland, you know, dressed in a short skirt, neat outfit, you know, guys goggling all over her, you know, and she's sucking down a beer, and, you know, and then it goes, that's Finland's leader, and this is our female version of that, and they showed Liz Warren. I think I'll have a beer.
I think I'll get me a beer.
That's it. Yeah.
Then her husband walks in. I'm glad you're here. And then Trump's like, "What do you mean? He lives there."
and didn't he say, "Do we have a can opener?"
I don't
twist off beer.
I don't remember that part, but I do remember her husband slapping her ass on camera. And her kind of giving that O face. I'm like, wasn't expecting that from my political ed, but whatever. Heidi me, it's weird stuff. But I heard the most bizarre comment. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna just pause the tape and reset it just for editing purposes.